Good morning, everyone. I'm Inge van Nieuwerburgh from Ghent University, and welcome to this RDM Training and Support Catalogue webinar. I have first some household questions, some household rules, excuse me, not questions, to give to you. So next slide, please. This webinar will be recorded and will be published online on the EOSC-Pillar website. So at any time you can look at the slides again and hear the recordings and forward it to your colleagues. Please keep your questions until the end of the session, and then we'll address them all in one time. And we will cover the questions through the chat Zoom function. So don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat function, and we'll get back to you after the presentations. And then if it's not possible to answer all the questions during this event, we will get back to you after the event. Next slide, please. Now, we will start with, it's just a small agenda, of course. I will give an introduction to EOSC and EOSC-Pillar, and the main part of this webinar is, of course, about the EOSC-Pillar Training and Support Catalogue that Paula Oset Garcia, my colleague here in Ghent University, will explain, and then we'll have a feedback session. But to start with, let's try out the Wooclap that we introduce to. And everybody hear me? I see here a remark that someone doesn't hear me. If everyone else is here, hears me well. Do you hear me? Yes, okay, thank you. So we'll do a little icebreaker, and we'll use Wooclap for that. For a better experience, it's best to use a second screen, for example, your smartphone. You can see that we have a QR code here, so it's very easy with your smartphone to enter that site where we will ask you a few questions. Now, with these questions, you will see you can answer the poll, and then at the end, you have to click the submit button. Don't forget that, otherwise your answer is not recorded. So you can scan this QR code or use the link that I will paste in the chat box here. So go to wooclap.com/pillar, and then you will see the different questions that we will start with as an icebreaker, just so that you can get used to the Wooclap experience. So connect to the Wooclap, and then we'll start asking just a few icebreaker questions, nothing serious to start with. Paula, can we start the questions?
I will maybe leave a few seconds more. We have 29 participants. So just allow some more.
Yeah. Yeah. For those who just joined. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was wondering if you can see the number of participants below or not.
For the Wooclap?
Yeah. Bottom right.
Yeah, I have to use, yeah. Let me see.
Almost 35 people. 35.
Oh, then almost everyone is there.
Yeah. Okay, so I will jump.
Yeah. Thank you. So you will see the first question here. It's just a question, I said, icebreaker, just to get to use the Wooclap. So that you can see how it works. So we have several languages here in our webinar today. Looking good. Paula, I don't see the number of answers, so that's something that you can see.
Yeah, it's 27 now.
Okay. Ooh. Is that Chinese? Yeah. Okay, yeah, great. Maybe, yeah, I see 29. Yeah, I see it, Paula. Halukas, yes, that's a local variant. Okay, let's move to the next one, Paula. So, what is the weather like in your part of the country? Well, if in your part of Europe or wherever you are based at the moment. Only a few people have rainy weather today. And I see that most of you have no problems using the Wooclap. Okay.
Yeah. It will be the same code throughout the whole session, so you can keep this screen or this tab open if you want.
Well, now that we have tried Wooclap, let's introduce EOSC-Pillar, EOSC and EOSC-Pillar, so that we can move on. So next slide, please. So many of you already know about the European Open Science Cloud. This is part of the European Commission's vision of open science, to have better science through open and collaborative ways of producing and sharing knowledge and data as early as possible in the research process. So it's sharing of knowledge, sharing of data, sharing of publications, everything. And of course, you need an infrastructure to back this up, so to really advance this vision. And infrastructure is just one part of the solution. You also need skills and training so that people are able to use and understand EOSC and how it certainly researchers can help them in their own research process. Next slide, please. Yes, there are several projects going on at this moment within the EOSC realm, so to say. Since 2016, several of them are going on. You see a bunch of them here, and they all have to, in the end, have to interact, and they all add to the EOSC experience. Next slide, please. A few of those projects are regionally focused, and EOSC-Pillar is one of these 4 regional projects where we try to harmonize efforts within a country. Next slide, please. So in EOSC-Pillar, for example, we try to coordinate and harmonize national initiatives, infrastructures, and data services in 5 European countries, namely Belgium, France, Germany, Austria, and Italy. Next slide, please. We are a consortium of 18 partners here, and so we coordinate these national open science efforts and ensure their contribution and readiness for the implementation of the European Open Science Cloud. This is a joint effort. This is not something that can be done by one single party. There are several stakeholders involved here. Next slide, please. So the challenges that we address is first the coordination of national initiatives, alignment of national policies, communication between EOSC projects. This is quite important because if you have a common vision to get there, you need to talk to each other and know what others are doing to align all the actions, all the tasks within the different projects. Standardization and certification is, of course, an important issue. Issue is a wrong word, an important thing to address. And this, of course, goes together with the uptake of the FAIR principles to get it in place all over Europe. So to advance interoperability and reuse of data and services. Training is an important part. You can see this as a part of the training that we offer through EOSC-Pillar, and we want to engage scientific communities and have a comprehensive services landscape. Next slide, please. Now, Ghent University is involved in 3 work packages, but is also, of course, through these 3 work packages, is connecting to other work packages within EOSC-Pillar. With this workshop is part of work package 2 and 5 at the same time, because 2 is outreach and dissemination, community building. So we want to involve you in what we are doing here in EOSC-Pillar. We are not doing this on our own. And in work package 5, we are working on the data layer, and part of that data layer and uptake of fair data services is the fair data stewardship training and support catalog. So Paula will tell you all about it, but with this training and support catalog, what we try to do is get information on train the trainer. But there's so much out there, and there's so much we can use, but how do we use it, and how do we keep a nice view on that? Now, in other parts of EOSC-Pillar, there are, for example, use cases being developed, and in future webinars we will try to integrate them in the trainings, and we will offer more webinars on those kind of subjects. Now, this webinar is about the Fair Data Stewardship Training and Support Catalog, and my colleague Paula will tell you all about it. Paula, the floor is yours.
We have first, before we move on to the catalog, we have some additional questions for you, just to feel what your role is within your institutions, whether you are involved in RDM support or not, and yeah, what type of participants we have and potential users for the catalog. So I think most of you are already connected to Wooclap. So what is your function within your organization? We see that we have, that's nice, that we have a minority of actual data stewards within the participants, and in general research support as well. Don't forget to click on submit once you click your option. Okay, we will move on to the next question. Does your role involve support and training researchers with RDM? I would imagine that all of those that answered that are data stewards, the answer yes. Maybe some of you are in roles that are evolving into more RDM support. So in the near future, you expect to provide this type of training. And so we would hope that the catalog is something that you can find useful in your job. And only a minority has a role that doesn't involve training researchers with RDM. Okay, so in the next question, we would like to ask you, what do you find the most difficult aspect of supporting researchers with RDM? So are there specific topics that you find especially complex or difficult to convey or to explain to researchers, or perhaps is more about the engagement part of convincing or changing cultures? It can be anything, not only topics, but maybe attitudes, etc. Yeah, I would agree that metadata is a difficult one indeed, and GDPR as well. The terminology, ethics, and legal and privacy issues, intellectual property rights in them, indeed. Making RDM central or a crucial part of the role. It's been traditionally neglected, and is indeed difficult to convince that they should integrate RDM during the whole research process. I think this will be very useful for us because we are still adding content to the catalog and having a taste of what others find difficult can also help us in deciding which contents are more relevant for the catalog or where we have to focus our attention. Okay, we have multiple questions, so I will move to the next one. Do you feel it's easy to find information and resources to support researchers with RDM? So when you're trying to answer a question or find something, a tool or something that is useful, is it easy or not? Yes, it is easy. It is not difficult, but the information is very scattered. No, I find it difficult, or I don't know yet because I haven't started. I am quite happy to see that most of you think it's very scattered because we, as in Ghent University, we started the team of data stewards a year ago, and we indeed found that there is a lot of information out there that it's very useful or that can help us a lot in helping others, but it's all over the place. So this is one of the main reasons or rationale to build up a training and support catalog. So I'm happy to see that in a majority. Okay, so thank you for all the replies. Now we will have a bit of a look in the catalog and what we have been doing so far and how we built up the catalog. And so Inge mentioned that one of the tasks, one of the work packages in which we are involved is work package 5. And one of the main challenges or objectives of the call for all these regional projects, EOSC regional projects, was to promote fair data culture and to promote the uptake of good practices in making data fair. So the way that we have addressed this call objective is mainly within 2 tasks within work package 5, task 5.3 and 5.4. The task 3 is pure training. So we organize training about EOSC services or fair data, RDM. So anything to do with the training and the skills that are necessary to realize the EOSC, so to say. But in 5.4, we are, well, the task was to document and promote fair practices and support fair-oriented data stewardship. And what we have been doing is to develop a training and support catalog where we can collect in a structure and online in a structured way. So with a set of metadata elements, we have developed a catalog, a collection of online searchable resources for fair data stewardship and research data management. So what you can find here, for example, are many tools, web pages or checklists or courses that we as data stewards during our first year at Ghent University, we have found useful, but in a single access point and all described with controlled terminology. And one of the challenges that Inge mentioned is to connect, to talk and to connect with other EOSC initiatives. This is for us very important because at the moment there are many other projects or groups that are working and anything that's related to skills and training for the EOSC. So it's important that we connect or we try to align with them. So in the next slide, I've compiled a few projects. It's not comprehensive at all because you have many other initiatives or projects that are working on training and skills. For example, within the SFRIS, there's training components as well, and these are not represented here. But we have tried to summarize some of the most relevant for us or some of the projects in which we are engaging or projects that have very interesting outputs on which we have built upon. So for example, EOSC-Pillar, which finalized a couple of years ago and was one of the first projects in the initial development of the EOSC. They came up with this framework for skills and capabilities for the EOSC, which is called the Fair4S framework. And there they define different professional roles that are involved in data stewardship. So this is some vocabulary that we could use. They also define a set of skills groups. So for data stewardship happens, the skills that are needed for data stewardship were grouped in different skills groups. For each skills group, they developed also a set of competencies. And they also developed a minimum set of metadata that we have been using as well. But this work is being continued, or there are other groups that are building upon this outputs from the EOSC-Pillar project, such as the group of terms for fair skills, which are trying to, from that vocabulary that emerged from EOSC-Pillar, they're trying to develop real ontologies, so with hierarchy and definitions, etc. And things like the minimum set of metadata is also being reviewed by groups such as the EOS Skills and Training Working Group. And the First Fair project is also working in a competence center. So they also have defined this sort of schema to define or to classify or categorize training resources. And so we are not reinventing the wheel. We are trying to use all the work that's been done in the past and trying to be compatible with these other initiatives and not duplicate efforts. Then, of course, in the regional project as well, there are training initiatives. So it's very important for us to communicate with this project so that we can all benefit from each other. So something weird happened there in the slide, but anyway. The metadata schema that we're using, as I said, it's based upon the EOSC-Pillar outputs. You can find it there. So each property or each field, you have at the top almost any online resource will have this type of metadata. It's just title, description, a URL, and if possible, a persistent identifier, etc. And then at the bottom, or except language and country, at the bottom, you can find some more specific metadata elements that are relevant to these training resources for data stewardship. So we have the skills group that are coming from the EOSC-Pillar, competence topics, domains, etc. And what we have done is to also try to look for control vocabularies or terms to populate these metadata elements. So from skills group, as I said, we take it from the for S framework from EOSC-Pillar. Competence topic they're also developed in EOSC-Pillar, but the group of terms for fair skills, there are too many acronyms here. This group is building upon it, so we will in the near future have a comprehensive ontology for competencies. The domain or subjects, we are taking that from the re3data.org subject classification, etc., etc. So we are going to have a little bit more detail about it now. So for skills group, as I said, we are relying on the outputs of the EOSC-Pillar framework. And we can see two types of skills group. Some are generic capabilities. So capabilities that can be applied in different projects, cross-cutting capabilities. And so for a specific resource or training resource or support resource that we have in the catalog, we associated or we classified it according to the skills group. So there can be something, a specific tool that you can use for this type of skills group. And then we have a second skills group or group of skills which belong to what we call the research life cycle. So these are usually applied in project specific ways, and I think most of the data stewards here will recognize the research data life cycle. That is a core concept in RDM. And so, for example, a specific tool for data cleaning, you would classify it, for example, during the capture process or integrate analyze phase of the research. As for competencies, these are more fine-grained competencies within each skills group. They come also, well, EOSC-Pillar also came up with this a list of competencies, but at the moment we are not using them because we know that they're going to be, there's work in progress within the terms for fair skills group, and we know that this is going to change in the near future. So it is quite labor intensive to attach competencies. It's a long list of competencies, and it's quite labor intensive to classify each resource according to these competencies. And we know that they're going to change in the near future. So we are holding a bit for this category or this element. Subjects, as I said, we are using the read3data.org subject classification. We know that there are other groups that are working in subject ontologies, so we also have to see how this will evolve, but at the moment we are using this. This is, for example, the same approach that is being used in the competence centers in the first project. So we will have to see, within the EOSC landscape, what is the approach that is used, or what is the standard or the vocabularies that are agreed upon, so that we can be compatible. But at the moment, this is what we are using. We added a project-specific category because many resources can be used in any type of project, or they're discipline agnostic. And so there's one category that we added that doesn't belong to read3data.org, but we needed it. Then each resource, it's meant for a specific target group or few target groups. In general, there will be more than one professional role that could use the same research, but for different purposes. So there might be something where you, as data steward, use to train researchers, but a researcher can use it to follow himself or herself, of course. So the ones that are in darker blue are those that are more common in the resources that you can find in the catalog, but there are also other roles such as the ethics and data protection advisor. So when you have a resource that is related to GDPR or etc., it's useful for a researcher, but it's also useful for a data steward, but also for perhaps a TPO or an ethics advisor. So in terms of the content, there are two categories, although this is a bit of a, so to say, artificial classification, because in reality, when you look at the catalog, you don't see any difference between the resources. But we know there are some other initiatives or other training catalogs with maybe some discipline-specific focus, etc. And so we wanted to include training as well. So training material, you can think about it as material that is meant for gaining knowledge, developing skills, such as courses, tutorials, guidelines, etc. But we wanted to include some other materials that are a bit more difficult to classify, to say, because they're not, well, they're not training as such, but these are things that we use very often as data stewards. Sometimes a researcher is developing a data management plan and they don't want to follow a course. They just want examples or templates or things like that. So we have this other type of resources there, tools that are ready to use, so solutions, things that can be immediately used without any background training. And these are things like decision trees, checklists, etc. And when a couple of weeks ago, we presented the catalog in a very brief presentation during the Open Access Week, and I thought it's maybe easier to provide a couple of examples to explain this difference. So, as I said, you can follow some training in for data management plans. So you have this online course, which is it's a very nice introductory course to research data management, and then there is a module about data management plans. So there you gain knowledge and skills about what should you include in a data management plan, or what are typical sections of a data management plan, etc. But on the other hand, most of the times, or many times, what our researchers would like to have is a plain example to draw inspiration. You can eventually use these examples during a training. If you're organizing a training, you may give them examples so that they can judge whether it's a good answer or not a good answer, or something similar would happen with the review rubrics, for example. So by looking at this example, they can also gain skills and knowledge, but it's not the main purpose of the examples per se. And something similar with FAIR, you can find many training resources about FAIR data, but then you can find things like the FAIR self-assessment tool, where you answer a few questions that come from the FAIR principles. And by answering these questions, you are given a score about how fair your data set is. And then a researcher could use this to judge his own data set and decide if he or she will take further action to make it more fair. But you could also use this during a training session, etc. So it's not a training resource in itself, but depending on how you use it and for which purpose, you can see it. It fits in the catalog because it's a training and support material. So just a quick demo about the catalog. And the first thing I would like to let you know is that you can view the catalog as guest users. But if you actually want to click in the resource and open the link that will take you to the tool or to the course, etc., you need to be registered. So just go to this address, to this URL, and then you can register, and then you immediately will gain access to the catalog. But to play with the catalog, you don't necessarily need to register, because you can view all the metadata records just as a guest user. So this is how it looks like. It's quite straightforward. It has a search bar on top. You can type there anything, and you will get all your results on the right panel. And then there is the functionalities to filter. So when you have a few records, the filters are not needed, or you probably won't use the filters. But when you have hundreds and hundreds of records, you probably want to fine tune or narrow down your search using filters. And these filters are based in the categories that we described, such as target group or skills group. We also have things like type of resource, keywords, etc. So you can find this in the left side. When you click on one of the records, you have a detailed description. You have all the tags that are associated, again, based on these description items. And then you get access to the resources. So each item can actually be linked to many different types of resources. And this is what you cannot, where you can click, but it won't allow you to see the URL. If you're only a guest user, you need to register in order to view what's inside this. So I pasted some slides here with potential use cases. You can go to the catalog and search yourself for different things. Of course, it's work in progress. We're still adding records. But let's say, for example, that you have a researcher that is, or you want to get a question. Someone is using Excel and has been using Excel for a lot of time, and it's not maybe so keen on changing the way he analyzes or she analyzes data. But you want to recommend some best practices about using Excel. So do's and don'ts about Excel. So which formats, or what happens if you export Excel to another more sustainable format, what can happen to your formulas or etc. So you have here, for example, an Excel data curation primer, which will give you tips about what to do and what not to do with Excel, and what are the best practices, what are the common errors in Excel with that field format, things like that. You have good tables, which is free tool for data validation and no, data validation, not cleaning. It's developed by the Open Knowledge Foundation, etc. Imagine you come across a project that's processing personal data and is thinking, or this researcher is thinking to use consent as a lawful basis. So, but maybe you're looking for examples, templates, etc. So you could look for items related to consent, and and there you can find guidelines at the moment. Hopefully you will find more than 4 in the future. You can find guidelines on informed consent. There is a consent form wizard, which, based on the details on the projects that you give through a questionnaire, they will propose a template consent form, which of course you should review afterwards, because everything in GDPR is very case specific. There is a course about fair and open science, and one of these course materials is related to GDPR. And you have something like the lawful-based interactive tool. So resources that can help in a case where you are dealing with consent in a project. Or maybe you are going to organize a training session about FAIR and you're just looking for inspiration, slides that are already available, or videos that you can find, or I don't know, the things like the tool, the FAIR self-assessment tool. So again, you could find, just by typing FAIR, you can find a series of resources, and then you can fine tune it with filters. Or maybe you are looking for information about electronic laboratory notebooks because you're trying to find one, or you're trying to find about other experiences. There we have things like a matrix that was developed by Longwood Medical Area from Harvard University, where they compare according to different criteria, different electronic notebooks. So that could be an inspiration for you when you're looking for one software, etc. So this is how the catalog looks like. This is the type of things that you can find in the catalog. What we're going to do in the near future is to, of course, continue populating the catalog with more resources. We know now that we are lacking, or that we have more discipline agnostic resources, and what we want to focus on more discipline specific content. Inge mentioned these use cases that are being worked in work 7. So we hope, or we expect that from the work in this work, which we can track some more disciplines specific content as well. Of course, we have to follow up these related projects that are working with training and skills. The specifications that are changing, such as will there be a change in how we classify subjects? Will we move from 43data.org to another ontology? The ontology is developed in terms of first skills, so we have to keep track on that and align with these other related projects. And we want to get feedback and improve the catalog, user experience wise, but also content wise. And this is one of the main reasons we are doing this webinar. So with this, I move again to one of our last poll. And after that, we can have a Q&A session. So I think most of you are connected, so I will jump into the next question. Do you find, I'm not sure if you already tried it, but do you think it's a user-friendly way to discover resources? I don't see, oh yeah, okay, now I see the question. Maybe you should try. Yeah, I would encourage you to try it. You are always welcome to give us feedback afterwards. We are in a early phase of development, so we're still flexible to adapt. And of course, if you already have suggestions, you can let us know on the chat or in the Q&A. We actually have one sort of post-it wall for suggestions at the end, which we've never tried before, so we hope it works. Let's cross our fingers. Okay, the next question. Do you think that you could discover resources that you were not aware of with a tool like this? And actually, something that that we would like to ask is, or something that we've been thinking is how we could integrate a sort of feedback mechanism in the tool, so that when people are aware of a nice research that is not included in the catalog, how they could notify that to us. At the moment, we don't have it, but you can always drop us an email. But this is something that we think would be nice. Okay, I'm happy to see these results. Thank you for your answers. The next question is, would you judge from what you've seen? Of course, you have only seen a snapshot of what is in the catalog, but would you judge? Do you think you could use these resources in your daily tasks when supporting researchers? That's nice to see. Well, I will say it again, don't forget to press submit in the Wooclap tool. But I think it's our last question before we post it. From the categories that you've seen that we use right now to describe each resource, which one do you think would be more useful to find and filter results? So we have the skills group, this generic skills group, but also the research lifecycle skills. We have domain, or subject, the target group, so which role or professional role the resource is intended for, type of resource, keywords, license. I have to say that many resources often, because they're just maybe a web page, they don't have a license at the moment, which is a pity, but it's what it is. And the reason why we ask it is because it can give us a bit of a clue on how to organize the left panel in a way that it's more useful for potential users of the tool. You can answer multiple times. So if there are 2 or 3 that you find more useful, you can do that too. Okay. And finally, we are going to, during the Q&A session, we are going to leave this open. If you want to give us a specific feedback about the user experience, so how do you find the interface? Is it easy to search, filter, navigate? I think many of you haven't tried it, but maybe at first sight, what does it look like? Then you can also provide just comments about the content relevance. Are there things that you're missing or other things that you maybe don't think relevant? And any other feedback that you can think of. So this will be open during the Q&A, which we can start now. I don't know if there were questions in the chat.
Yes, Paula, there are several questions in the chat. Let me quickly take these questions here. First question is whether we liaise with thematic clusters where there's a lot of training targeted and tailored for researchers. I think this addresses the question of in how far are projects interacting and collaborating. We are trying to connect with as many thematic clusters as possible. In many of the EOSC projects, thematic clusters are included for use cases or just as a partner in a project. So there are many ways how this is done. But in the end, it's all about collaboration between the projects and the question on in how far everything that is being developed in these projects is going into the EOSC portal in the end. And a lot is been taken up. And actually, that also addresses the question that comes later: what is a sustainability model of the catalog? We are not inventing the wheel here on our own. We have partners that are also partners in FAIR, for example, and partners working on D4Science. So there's a lot of reuse of same kind of tools throughout the EOSC-Pillar, throughout EOSC projects, including EOSC-Pillar. So that should add to the sustainability question of the model. I can't answer anything more than that at the moment. Now there was a question about the catalog. I don't see the option to log in using ORCID, and then it seemed that it is under logging with academic other account. So that's where you can log in with your ORCID, and then of course there is a remark, maybe this should be more highlighted on its own ORCID and not hidden behind academic or other account. Probably, Paula, this is a question that was already addressed before with the developers of the catalog. So that is no longer a question. We have found where ORCID registration is. Login into the catalog. Now, a question for you, Paula. If I publish training material, is it possible to contact you to add the material in the catalog? And there are several questions about how to get material into the catalog.
Yes, indeed. So at the moment, we don't have a good way, or a semi or automatic way for others to collaborate in the catalog. But this is certainly something that we would like. We would like people to be able to fill in a metadata form. So the way the catalog works is that you can harvest from other types of catalog, for example, CKane catalogs, but you can also use a user interface, such a metadata form. And we would like that some users can just input records there, perhaps with some sort of level of curation in between, where we can review whether that record exists, for example, so that we don't create duplicates and things like that. So this is not yet available. So at the moment you can contact me, for example, and I can add these records into the catalog. If your catalog is based in some of the technologies that are compatible with what we use, the D4Science, so I think it's CKAN, DCAT, and CSW, I think you can. So if you have a catalog, we could eventually harvest it automatically. If you provide training or you just have a website with some training, you can contact me and I would add it. And hopefully in the future we will have a way for users to suggest content.
Yeah, maybe I can add to this that, of course, this is the first beta version that you see of the catalog, which is presented today. This is in development, of course, so still a lot of, and that's one of the reasons why we have this feedback session, to hear what we need to consider to add to the catalog and how we should advance it. Now the questions we had through the chat are answered on, I think, because the other questions were all about aggregation of material and how to add material to the catalog. So you have just answered that, Paula. But as you can see, there are some more questions coming into the feedback form. Paula? Maybe
yes.
You can answer them.
Language, yeah, I see there's a question to search by language. It is indeed not possible to search by language at the moment, but this is in the metadata. So it should be possible to implement. So I think if people find it useful, and one of the things, so because we are a regional project, we also want to include training in other languages. So not only in the EOSC-Pillar languages, but maybe all European languages. So we are including language at the moment because we think it might be useful in the future, but it's not possible yet to use this field to search for metadata or for records. But indeed, it's a good idea. Catalogue is difficult to find from the EOSC-Pillar gateway. I'm not sure what this person means. Normally you have like a home and then another tab which says Catalogue. So when you log in, you will have this, or when you click on the as a guest user, you have Catalogue, sorry, home and Catalogue. So you have to click.
I suppose it's on the EOSC-Pillar website. I think that is the question. So yeah.
I'm not sure, I'm sorry. I'm not sure exactly what this person means. Can people search by very specific fields somehow? The re3data.org classification scheme has, if I'm correct, at least three levels. So they start from very broad subjects and they go into narrow subjects and then domains and subdomains. So we are only including the first two levels because most of the times we would not be using this third level of classification because it's too fine-grained. So you can probably find maybe language studies, but not Arabic studies at the moment. But we could consider that, but in reality, we found that most of the resources are often not that detailed. Because the RDM, most of the times the tools that you will use don't go, the research data management won't go in maybe into the level of Arabic studies, but maybe language studies. So you will have repositories for the language or humanities instead of Arabic studies. But it's a difficult one to balance the level of detail.
Now, Paula, we are almost at the end of our time. Maybe one more question that we can answer is, can we integrate this database in our library catalog search function somehow? That's a question that we'll ask probably to our technical people to give some information on that.
But there are APIs, so it is in principle possible. If this person wants to send us an email, we can provide more details, but there are APIs, so it's possible.
Thank you. So in the chat, I see that Nela asked about the specific fields because they develop short workshop materials for very specific fields sometimes.
At the moment, we are not using the third level of category.
Okay.
I don't know if you would find language studies sufficient. Of course, probably it's in the title, or we could add it as a keyword, for example. No, we're not including that level of specificity now.
Now, there's one question here, EOSC-Pillar training and support catalog, not very informative about the topic RDM support. I don't know what this person means by that. If you can clarify in the chat, for example, then we can take this up in answering these questions after this webinar, because we cannot answer all of them anymore. We will come back at a later stage on the catalog when this is developed further on down the line, and give maybe improved ways of how you can announce materials for the catalog and how to address that. Paula, do you have a last word that you want to add at this stage?
No, again, repeating that if you have, we will reply back to you with the questions that cannot be addressed. We will follow up in an email. And thank you for joining and providing us feedback for the catalog.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice day, and we'll keep you informed about future EOSC-Pillar information sessions, including webinars, and certainly about the catalog. Thanks a lot for your attention, and have a nice day.